Well, we're still at war, except we're not actually at war because it's not a war, except the war started like 40-something years ago, but the war is almost over. But at the same time, the war's not even close to being over, and we can't necessarily rule out a draft. I don't know what's going on. I don't think anybody knows what's going on with the war in Iran. Last week we talked about it just a little bit more time to kind of go over, and process and see what's developing and how this is really looking like it's going to play out. I don't like the war. I'm against the war in Iran. I think the president needs to I don't know if I want to phrase it as cut the losses, call it a victory, slap whatever label you have to have on it. We need to get out of there. We're going to be having a little bit of tough love for number 45, number 47, President Donald J. Trump. I think if you really care about somebody, if you really love somebody, you will give them a little bit of tough love. We'll also be talking about separation of church and state, America's Christian heritage. There'll be timestamps for anybody who's watching over on YouTube. There'll be timestamps in the description below. Feel free to jump around. For everybody else, let's start off the best way that we know how around here, and that is by taking just a minute to give glory and honor to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He is the only one that will never abandon you. He will never fail you. He'll never disappoint you. He is the firm foundation, the rock in which you should build your entire life. Now, with that said, we're going to jump in. The first topic today is separation of church and state. I made a video about this on Instagram. This used to be a topic that I would talk about really often. And it's a shame because there's so many people, and I would even extend a bit of an olive branch here at the beginning of the show. And I would say there's probably people who are really well-meaning, but literally just don't know any better. They actually believe in their heart of hearts, for one, that separation of church and state, well, there's so many layers to this onion. Where do we even want to start? They believe separation of church and state means that Christians have to stay out of politics, that you can't use your worldview, your religious values, as an influence of what you think is good and just or unjust legislation, that you're not allowed to do that Christians have to leave their religion at the door as they enter into the halls of power. If you're an elected official, a member of Congress, president, whatever it might be, there are many people who actually believe you have some sort of a constitutional duty to not be a Christian, like to take your Christian hat off, set it aside, and then go in as some sort of like a secular, I don't know, as secular humanist or something. You're going to make up your own morality on the fly. There's a lot of people who believe that that's actually the constitutional requirement because they believe the Constitution itself says separation of church and state. Now, you'll be surprised to find that you can scour front to back, back to front. You could look through the entire United States Constitution. You will not one time find those 5 words in that order. Separation of church and state is nowhere to be found in the United States Constitution. But people will say, wait, Victor, my 5th grade civics teacher told me that that was a thing and that it was in the Constitution. Now, to present what actually is, it says very clearly in the First Amendment, it says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's the section. There's 5 freedoms of the First Amendment. That's where we get to religious and religious freedom and your right to worship as you so choose. But anyway, that's the part of the First Amendment. There's other parts as well, press and assembly and etc. But that's the part that's relevant to the discussion on separation of church and state. That's the closest that you're going to get. Now, and in some people's eyes, they think, okay, well, that basically is the same thing, right? Are you just being pedantic? Am I just being like nitpicky or something? Like, oh, well, actually, it doesn't technically say it, but, it only says it. Actually, it doesn't say that at all. So if we look at the Constitution, I've seen many people, and again, there's so many layers to this onion that we could continue to peel through, but there's a lot of people who genuinely think, in part because of media, entertainment, but also, again, because of the public education system. Remember, by the way, real quick, your government will never give you the information needed for you to protect yourself from them. It's simply not going to happen. If you went to public education, I went to public education for 8 years of my education. It's not your fault. Like, I'm not knocking you as a human being, but if you got your education from the government, you didn't get a good education. In fact, you didn't even get an education at all. You got an indoctrination. There's the old phrase, you can't send your children, right? They say this to parents, you can't send your children to Caesar for 8 hours a day and wonder why they come back Roman. So the government is not going to teach you, for one, the bad things that our government has done. They're not going to talk to you about all of the horrible CIA stuff. They're not going to talk about like Operation Northwoods. They're not going to talk, none of that. It's all sunshine and roses. It's weird as you sit in history class in the public education system, the good guys have won every single time. That's the darndest thing. Every single time there was ever a conflict, ever a dispute in our nation's history, it was always very black and white, very clear cut. And the good guys, they triumph. It's like a Western movie you used to watch with your grandpa. Except that's not actually how the world works. The winner writes the history books. And so I understand, you're not going to dump everything on a child when they're in fourth grade. You do have a level of nuance with this, and you give them weight according to what they can actually carry, and the depth of history is kind of, we'll never know. So, in a way, I understand why you wouldn't dump that on a child in elementary school. But I just say all this to say, you might hear what I'm talking about today and think, Victor, that's crazy. That's totally counter to what, Miss Smith told me in fourth grade. Well, that's because, again, not necessarily at any fault of Miss Smith. She was given the curriculum by the government. And so the government does not have a vested interest in teaching you what you need to know to protect your rights. In fact, this is human nature. The government has the exact opposite motivation. They have an incentive structure to make sure that you're not educated, that you don't know what's going on, that you don't know your actual rights. And so when we read the First Amendment, and we see here very clearly, we see in the First Amendment, the Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. There are Supreme Court cases, there's stuff like that. And I think what I meant to get to at that whole rabbit trail that will land it finally, there's a lot of people who, because of the public education system, think that they need someone else to explain the Constitution to them, that you're too stupid. You don't know. I mean, you're just not, you can't possibly comprehend what the Founding Fathers wrote in the Constitution. You need an attorney to come and explain it to you. Or you need some sort of a Supreme Court decision that came 120 years after it was written. Those guys are the ones that can explain it to you. Let me tell you, very matter of fact, that's crap. That is a load of bull crap. You as a literate, if you're a literate human being with an IQ above room temperature, you can read and understand and interpret and comprehend the United States Constitution. It wasn't made for lawyers. It wasn't made for judges. It wasn't made for politicians. It was made for you. And we know that this is a undisputable fact because we had what was called the Federalist Papers. And inversely, the Anti-Federalist Papers. We had this dispute that was had among the people at the time of the ratification of the Constitution. This was a national debate where everybody had to understand it, and where there were questions, there's entire volumes of articles. The Federalist Papers, like more than 70 of them. There are volumes of papers where the Founding Fathers were extremely clear about the way that the Constitution was supposed to function. So no, you don't have to defer to some robed tyrant, some liberal freak, because listen, my wife is an attorney. I don't hate all attorneys. I love one. I love one more than anything in the entire world. But the legal schools in this country, like the law schools, the legal system, the bar associations, extremely liberal. Okay, so they're the ones. Unfortunately, we need really good conservatives to be entering into the legal field. We haven't had them for a long time, or at least they've been horribly outnumbered is probably a better thing to say. We've had some great ones. There's just too many of the other ones, and we didn't get the appointments we needed, and etc. But anyways, you can understand the Constitution. And so when it says Congress shall make no law establishing a religion, what does that mean? Well, it means exactly what it said. Let's look at the historical context. Why would that have been in the Constitution? I don't know. Maybe because of this little old thing called the Church of England. Maybe because there were people who were actually burned at the stake as heretics because they taught something counter to the official theology of the Church of England. Go back, remember, pick your brain of what you learned about why did the people leave Europe and why did they come to the New World? Why would you leave the greatest empire that the world had ever seen, the British Empire, and come and probably get killed by Indians? It probably die in the winter of starvation and freezing. Why would you risk that? Because of religious persecution. Much of the reason that people originally came to the United States, to the New World, was to get away from a specific entity known as the Church of England. So when the founders wrote about that, they're talking about the Church of England, which I don't dispute. There shouldn't be a Church of the United States. The founders were very clear about that. Their writing is very clear about it. We've seen it historically. It's not a good road to go down when you have the official designated church, and anybody who has a disagreement on even the tertiary issues, you got to hang them or something, you got to burn them at the stake. Absolutely not. So I'm not advocating for that. I don't think anybody is advocating for something like that. If they are, I would debate them happily and we can talk about it, but I very much so disagree. I don't think that that's a good I don't think it's a good way to handle things. I think that we should have freedom of religion within the various denominations of Christianity. That is certainly what the Founding Fathers were thinking of whenever they made this. But I don't want the Presbyterians or the Baptists or, I don't know, the Lutherans or something. I don't want them to be taking over and deciding the official theology of our country. I think that that's a really bad path to go down. That is all, though. That's not to say that if we have it's not establishing a religion to identify the fact that this is a Christian in culture. This is a Christian nation with a Christian heritage. So as we keep going on the topic of separation of church and state, we established, okay, that's not in the Constitution. Those words in that order are not in the Constitution. What the Constitution is very clearly saying is what it says, right? There's a famous quote, I think maybe it's Justice Scalia, I forget who gave it. When you read between the lines of the Constitution, all you find is empty paper. There's a reason. You're not supposed to be reading into it. This is one of the strategy of the liberal attorneys and et cetera, the people who are not originalists. They try and read in, well, what if we twist it? What if we look between the lines? What if we try and interpret it this way? No. That's not the way that you're supposed to do it. What does it say, and what did the people who wrote it mean when they wrote it? That's the lens through which you're supposed to view it. It's called originalist interpretation, but anyway. If separation of church and state, those 5 words in that order, are not in the United States Constitution, where the heck did that even come from? Where did the idea come from? Well, it kind of depends just how far back, you're really willing to go. We do have some historical context that goes like way back, but in the context of American history, you're really looking at a particular letter that was written by Thomas Jefferson in the early 1801, the early 1800s. It was written to the Danbury Baptist Association. And again, remember I mentioned we were talking about the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, the national debate surrounding the Constitution, its ratification, and all of the pieces inside of it. The Danbury Baptists were actually concerned about the First Amendment. They kind of understood it to be the exact opposite of what it really was. They were worried, like, okay, what do you mean? They reached out for some clarification, and that's where you see this language of separation of church and state. Jefferson is actually reassuring the Baptists, and he's saying, hey, no, you don't have to worry about this. The state is not going to come into your church and tell you how to worship. You're not going to get a memo from, I don't know, the Presbyterians and you're a Baptist or something. You're not going to get a memo on what you're supposed to preach this Sunday. You're not going to be told how you worship in your denomination of Christianity. That's where he wrote. He said, no, there's a separation here. The government's not going to come to tell you what you should be doing. It is not. Separation of church and state, correctly understood, means that the government isn't going to interfere in the business of the state. Separation of church and state is not to say that Christians or religious people have to they have to distance themselves from government. That would be insane. That is completely contrary to, for one, literally everything that all of the founders said. I mean, the vast majority of founding fathers were devout, confessing Christians. The examples that people will give, they'll say, well, actually, most of them were, at the most deists. They really didn't even believe in God. And Jefferson, he cut up pieces of the Bible. And Franklin, he said this and he said that. We've talked about it here on the show before. Jefferson has a very famous quote about how he trembles for his nation when he reflects that God is just and his justice cannot delay forever, essentially, cannot sleep forever, I think is the language that Jefferson famously used. That's not the belief of a deist. A deist believes that God made the world and stepped back and is kind of uninterested in what's happening. Well, Jefferson is literally saying that he's afraid of the fact that God would intervene and judge the nation if we were to be doing wrong. Franklin, very famously, as he got older, moved away from his deist positions as well. He said, the older I get, the more convinced I am that God governs the affairs of man. That is the exact opposite, like the polar opposite of the definitional stance of deism. So anyways, even the two flagship examples that they would try and give to be like, oh, well, Jefferson, or, oh, well, Franklin, these people might have been these people were probably more Christian than most self-avowed, Protestant Christians or Catholic, whatever. Most people who claim to be Christian in the United States probably had worse theology. I don't know. I never got the chance to meet the guys. But the rest, our founding fathers, the Adams brothers, Washington, you name it. Name the founding father, George Mason. I mean, go into the history of all of these founders. There's some amazing quotes from John Adams, for example, that the Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. To any other, it would be wholly inadequate. There is no question that these were devout Christian men. Let's go back a step further. Even before that, the Mayflower Compact, the original foundational document of the New World, they literally wrote in the Mayflower Compact that the reason that they were going to the New World was to spread Christianity for the glory of Jesus Christ. Like, that's our original foundational document, and it goes all the way through. You look at the Declaration of Independence. It's like a prayer. The last paragraph is basically a prayer. It reads as a prayer. You look at all of the different examples of creation, the creator. It's very, very obvious. So, no, under no circumstance. Jefferson used to order the military to pray all throughout the Revolutionary War. Study the history of Jefferson leading his troops, Washington, my goodness. Washington leading his troops through the Revolutionary War. Washington used to regularly order days of fasting and prayer to God throughout the war, okay? So that would be they printed Bibles, for goodness sakes. Congress printed Bibles for use in the public education system. At the beginning, we had blasphemy laws in this country for a long time. It was illegal. We had literal blasphemy laws in the United States of America. We were a Christian nation in heritage, in culture, in all of the. That was where we got our worldview. And so let me just say this, okay? They weaponized this false understanding of separation of church and state exclusively against Christians. They don't say this to anybody else. Everybody on planet Earth has a worldview. They might not call it a religion, but it's basically a religion. Whatever you might be, everyone has a worldview. You have something of a moral code. Now, you might just make yours up. You might be like a moral relativist, the dumbest position of all time. Proof of that statement, by the way, if you're a moral relativist and everything is just you have your truth, I have my truth, and there's no moral absolutes at all, that means you're no more right than Hitler was. That means you're no more right than Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, Saddam Hussein, anybody who was ever in Al-Qaeda or something like that. You would have your subjective view. They would have their subjective view, and who's to say who's really right? Because, we all just get our truth or something like that. Moral relativism is the dumbest, most destructive thing in the world. Even still, if you're a moral relativist, if you're a Buddhist, you're Jewish, you're Muslim, you're Christian, whatever you would be, you have a worldview. Think of your worldview as the lenses through which you view all of reality. There's something that you filter it all through. And as Christians, our view of right and wrong, it comes from the Bible. Now people say, well, I don't need the Bible to tell me how to be good. Your morality, even if you think you've decoupled yourself from Christianity, you almost certainly have not. The morality, the collective moral conscience of the entire Western world has been so thoroughly saturated with Christianity, you think that you're not reliant upon Christianity? You're like the guy who rode to the top of a mountain on somebody else's back. Like you got a piggyback ride to the top of a mountain, and then you get off at the very top and you're like, oh, that was easy. But that's the mountain of morality. You rode on the back of Christianity all the way up there, and you think that I just got here all by myself. No. Everything that you're basing, like stealing, murdering, coveting, all of these kinds of things, they're in the Ten Commandments, for goodness sakes. Okay? So the whole world, the whole Western world, largely has derived their sense of morality from the Christian worldview. They might not know it, they might not accept it, but even still, say you're Islamic, say you're whatever it might be, say you worship at the altar of the LGBTQ stuff, you're like a spawn of Molech or something, and everybody, not just Christians, everybody has a moral worldview. You have some framework. You have to have something, because that's the way you distinguish between good and bad. You have to have a measuring stick. You have to have a metric by which you measure things to say, okay, this law is good, this law is bad. How do we make that determination? Through your worldview, okay? You cannot expect people to step out of their morality. Do you want separation of state and morality? No, so you don't want separation of church and state. As it relates to our last two segments on America's history, heritage, all of the separation of church and state, I'm going to link to a couple of fantastic resources from my friends over at Wall Builders. This is not paid or promotional. They just have great content on this. I'm going to link a couple of things. So if you're watching on YouTube or wherever, I'm going to link it in the description of this video. So anyways, as we go on, let's talk about the war in Iran. Man, like I said, we talked about it last week. If you didn't catch last week's program, it's an expansion. Today, we're going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk at length on it because there's going to be developments, there's going to be updates, and I record this on one day. It goes out into different outlets at different times throughout the week, and so I don't want it to be too dated with pressing, military updates or anything. We're hearing reports that seem, unfortunately, to be true. Now, I don't often trust the mainstream media, so I'm kind of putting a bit of a caveat on this one. But we're getting reports from major media outlets. It seems people in the administration are kind of not denying it at this point, that we bombed a school of children, killing 175, predominantly, obviously, children, little kids in Iran. And so today we're going to be giving President Trump a little bit of tough love. As Americans, we do not have a king. We don't have someone that we owe our dying allegiance to, that we have to just blindly support every single thing that they ever do. I was a 2015 Trump guy. Okay, for anybody who's new to the show, I know we've been picking up some viewers on YouTube and stuff. To anybody who's new around here or just may have forgotten or something, I was on the Trump train before it was cool to be on the Trump train. I'm an early adapter. 2015 all the way, chugga chugga choo choo. I have been a diehard Trump guy all the way throughout all of it, through 2020, through the 16 election, through 24, when everybody had turned on him. I did not. I never turned on President Trump. I always believed in him. I always supported him. I've spent literally thousands of hours publicly doing debates, defending him, defending the administration, pushing people to vote for him, supporting his every policy that he's been pushing out, at least that I agree with, which was the vast, vast, vast majority. I have been defending him. I've been giving him the benefit of the doubt where at all applicable. I got off the Trump train with the Epstein situation because he straight up said, if you don't want to move on, you're stupid and I don't want your support. And so in that case, yeah, there is a line. There has to exist a line. I know I'm going to offend some of the Trump people out there with this, and it's not my intention to punch to the right. I don't want to be like infighting. That's never my goal. It's never my intention. But I do want to speak as a friend, as somebody who's on your team. We've been fighting together for a very long time. There does have to exist a line in the sand where you say, okay, Trump, I'm very appreciative of all of the things that you've done. I don't regret my vote. I certainly don't regret any of the times that I voted for President Trump. But this is not, I'm not going to follow you there. There is a place where I'm simply not going to continue to follow you. There are paths that I just won't go down. For example, for me, it was the handling of the Epstein situation. When he said, move on or you're stupid and I don't want your support, I'm never going to move on from that. He says it's not a big deal. We need to focus on other things. We've talked about, I'm not going to relitigate that whole thing. We've talked about it in previous episodes. That's where I officially, publicly, I got off. I said, you know what? I will support many of the individual actions of the administration. I don't regret my vote. But I'm not on that. You haven't seen me walking around in a MAGA hat since then. I do want to make America great again. I'm not like doing some turn and burn on anybody. I just cannot in good faith defend that. If somebody comes to me and they say, hey, Victor, I'm curious, how do you defend the situation with Epstein? I can't. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to pretend that I can. Now, I've offered this up many, many times. If somebody can come up with a way, a compelling defense, like give me something that actually makes sense. Don't just tell me to trust the plan. Give me something that actually makes sense. I would love to believe it. I would love to be wrong about the whole Epstein thing. I just don't. I just can't defend it. Okay, and so the Iran situation has quickly turned into one such case. Now, I defended him when it came to Venezuela because I fully believe in the Monroe Doctrine. That's our hemisphere. It's our side of the planet. They were shipping drugs and killing our people. When it comes to the situation in Iran, the original bombing, Operation Midnight Hammer, I think is what that one was called, with the B-2s out of Whiteman, I immediately was concerned about that. I started raising the alarm, saying, hey, I voted for no new wars. I don't want this to drag us into a war. I was assured that I was a panicking. I was told very clearly that there was a plan, that we didn't have a war. This would never turn into a war. We bombed them. We got in, we got out. And for a minute, it seemed like that was going to be the case. But now we're back. And it depends who you ask and on what day, because the administration at all levels, whether it's Pete Hegseth or Marco Rubio or Donald Trump himself, will all seemingly give you kind of conflicting answers on why exactly we went to war with Iran. Trump will tell you we had to do it because Israel was going to do it, but actually we did it because we were going to do it, but actually we did it because Iran was going to do it, but actually we did it. We've gotten it's fog of war, sure. You can give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's kind of hard to get the messaging on all of this. Okay, fair play, I suppose, but we were cheering during the election cycle, all of the rallies. We were holding signs that said no new wars. And now I'm being told we've actually entered into a war. Trump said, people die. He's talking about the casualties. More Americans are expected to die. He said this happens in war. But I was also told that we're not in war. But I was also told that we didn't start a war. But I was also told that the war is basically over. We basically won. But also it's not even close to over just yet. And we're not going to rule out the option of a draft. And we're not going to rule out the option of boots on the ground. And it's been reportedly considered. And again, I don't trust the media, so I take that with a grain of salt. But either way, there's so much confusion. There's so much going on. So what has happened? What do we know has happened with the situation in Iran? Well, we know we have now totally destabilized a nation of approximately 90 million people. That's a really big country. We're not talking about just some random little dot in the Middle East that's just like caves or something like that. This is a country of 90 million people. So we killed the leadership, which technically kind of not supposed to do, but it's, it is what it is, like Geneva Convention and stuff like that. But anyway, I don't care about that so much. But we killed the leader. We killed several of his family members. We killed the subsequent, 5 or something like that, next Ayatollahs that they picked out, the next leaders. Killed them. Okay. We blew up a bunch of, sank their entire navy, which, again, maybe I need to repeat this. I've said it many times before. I'll say it, I'm sure, many more times. I have no sympathy for the Iranian government, for the Iranian regime. I have no sympathy for radical Islam. I have no sympathy for these terrorist funders. I have no sympathy for... Listen, Iran has been picking a fight they've been poking a bear for a long time. They've probably been hedging. That's probably been their strategy, is they're trying to get close with the nuclear weapons, but not actually build one. But also, people have to wonder if they have one. There's a lot that goes into the international politics and the war and all of the... It seems to be that they've been playing a dirty game for a long time, walking a tightrope of sorts for a long time, both with their nuclear weapons, with funding proxies, but not actually doing it themselves. You get what I'm saying. They're trying to walk this very narrow path, and they've been chanting death to America all the while. So I have no sympathy for people who chant death to America, but if that's the standard, right? As soon as you chant death to America, the United States is greenlit to just blow you all up, kill all of your leaders and sink your entire navy and all that. We're going to blow up a lot of people. There's a lot of different countries that have a lot of leaders that have said horrible things about the United States. Iran is just one on a list of many. Are we going to be blowing all of them up as well? I'm not quite sure. But we killed the leadership. We killed his family. We've destabilized a country of 90 million people. And again, I have sympathy for the people. I don't have sympathy for the regime. But this has blowback on us. What's going to happen? Where you have war, you have refugees. Are we going to be welcoming in refugees? I sure hope not. It seems to be the position of the administration right now that we're not going to be taking any refugees in. But these are how refugee crises happen. 90 million people. If they all end up displaced and running around, that could be a really big issue. This isn't something where we can now just walk away and claim victory and never have anything to do with it. It looks to me, and I hope and I pray that I'm wrong, it looks to me like all of the ingredients are there to create a never-ending war. I don't know that it's a foregone conclusion just yet. Maybe the administration has some tricks up their sleeve, but if you look at it, it very closely mirrors the prior never-ending wars, and somebody will say, well, they all ended. It's not actually never-ending. Okay. The wars that last a really long time. You have to be specific because some people will find a reason to defend anything through anything. Anyway, you get what I'm saying, right? These forever wars, what Trump used to in 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, what he used to call stupid, pointless wars where we waste American dollars. We've spent billions of dollars, by the way, doing this. There's reports that we've depleted some of our interceptor supply that we've had to take away from other strategic areas like China and Taiwan and South Korea and that whole brouhaha that's happening over there. We've had to allegedly move some of our interceptors from there to the Middle East to protect Israel, to protect our bases, to protect etc. That, it looks like the ingredients are here for this to have been a catastrophic blunder. We have 7 now servicemen and women that are dead. That's not a small price. We have 7 servicemen and women that are dead. Trump wore a baseball cap to their funeral. If I was Joe Biden, there would have been a big outrage on the right. He wore a baseball cap, a white baseball cap, to the dignified transfer of the remains of some of the soldiers that died in the Iranian retaliation. So anyways, I'm not going to stick on that for super long, but we have 7 dead men and women. And now we're finding out that probably it looks like we bombed an elementary school twice. Twice. We hit it, and then like 40 minutes later, double tapped it. It looked to be the video's American Tomahawks. There was some initial disputing. Obviously, it wouldn't have been intentional. I don't at all think that the United States or anybody in our military would ever intentionally double tap an elementary school full of children, but it's entirely unacceptable. Somebody needs to answer for that. We don't do that here. We don't blow up 175 children. I don't care if they're Iranian children. We don't blow up 100. That's awful. That's completely horrible. And so I'm concerned now that we don't really have very many options. We're caught between a rock and a hard place. And again, maybe Trump can navigate it. I'm not one to bet against him when it comes to foreign policy. He actually, that's one place where historically he's done very good. He's pulled out deals. He's done things that nobody else thought was possible. And maybe nobody else could have pulled off, to his credit. But it seems from what we know without classified information, it seems that we really are stuck between two options. Either we leave now and declare victory, abandoning a now totally destabilized 90 million person country with surely leadership. If they didn't want to blow us up before, I can promise you they want to now. I mean, if you think about, put yourself in the shoes of the Iranian people, you just got sucker punched, presumably. Like, that's what it would feel like if you're Iranian. You'd think, hey, I mean, what the heck is going on? You know, we just got our nuclear facilities bombed to high heaven. And then randomly we just get cooked one day. You kill all of our leadership. You kill their families. You kill 175 people at a freaking elementary school that you hit 2 times. I mean, you want to talk about radicalizing a people. Maybe if they would have got a nuke before, I don't know, maybe they would have used it, maybe not. If they get a nuke now, you bet your bottom dollar they're going to, I mean, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you use a nuke? I mean, if you're Iran and you just had all of this crazy stuff that happened to you, it's one of the laws of power is you have to crush your enemy completely or you don't bother doing this kind of thing, because now you've created a whole nother generation of terrorists. You've created a whole nother generation of people that are sympathetic to it. They're going to have 175 children at a freaking school, okay? If that's not going to make these people, they're already a part of a radical Islam, okay? Introduce these sorts of things, yeah, that's your justification for jihad right there. So now if we just leave and we declare victory, it would be premature because we're just handing they're going to rebuild. They know how to make the nukes. A lot of their scientists are dead, and a lot of the facilities, the faculties are gone. They're going to get it again. It's a matter of time. We always talk about, oh, well, we didn't want to kick it down the road. We don't want to kick the Iranian situation down the road 10 more years, 15 more years. I'm sorry to tell you, man, in 15, 20 years, if we just walk away right now, we're going to be back here doing it again. Because now they really freaking hate us. So option 1 of just leaving seemingly isn't real. Like, we're going to have to go back, or there's going to have to be... Or option 2, we don't leave, we have to stay. And it requires maybe the Kurds coming in, but the Kurds don't really want to do it. Maybe it requires some sort of boots on the ground presence, which of course always starts as a special operation. You just have like special forces or something. They go in, one of them dies. That's what sets the stage to bring in all of the other people. So we're kind of in a rock and a hard place. It's not a Venezuela situation. Clearly, this is a real nation with 90 million people. It's been very destabilized. And I just don't know. This is not something I voted for. No new wars. I do not support the war in Iran. So as we were talking about last segment, I don't support the war in Iran. I support our troops. I support our military. I encourage you to keep our men and women in your prayers. I want this to be effective. I pray for Trump. I pray that he is wicked effective, that he surprises me, that he surprises all of the detractors, that he pulls out something amazing, like we get all of the oil, or so, that there's some like layer to this that we didn't see. And I'm not saying that that's beyond the realm of possibility. It's just it requires a certain level of faith that I don't know that I still have in President Trump. However, we do support the military. We have to continue supporting the mission. We have to continue supporting for the success and literally the life of our troops. I don't want this. I'm not going to be one of those people who's like rooting. I think I cannot stand the people who predict failure and then celebrate when it happens. Like, congratulations, you moron. But anyways, I want us to be successful in this mission now that it's begun. I don't support the fact that he did it. That's what I'm trying to say. More tough love, though. So moving on from the Iran thing, I mentioned last segment, if you care about somebody, if you love somebody, you're willing to tell them when they've gone off track. And unless you worship them like God, you should have the ability as a free-thinking American citizen to say, hey, I disagree with that. Hey, I disagree with this. Hey, I think, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. You made certain promises. I think that you actually ought to fulfill them. One of which, by the way, was no new wars. Real quick tangent. I can't help myself. I saw Trump is doing a rally in Kentucky. He's trying to get rid of Thomas Massie. I don't know that that'll be successful, but we'll watch it and we'll see. Trump is trying to get rid of Massey, and he's talking to the crowd of people, and he's like, "We don't want to leave Iran just yet. We don't want to leave premature. We don't want to leave too early," is what Trump is saying. And the audience is clapping, and they're like, "Yeah, war with Iran. We're not going to leave too early. We're going to keep going at it." And it's like, yeah, well, I remember like a year and a half, 2 years ago, he was probably campaigning, maybe not in Kentucky, he didn't really need to go there, but campaigning, and he would say, "No new wars. A vote for me is a vote to avoid war." And JD had tweeted about how, like Kamala would be getting us in war with Iran and all this stuff. And it's like the same people. Nothing really has changed. We haven't been attacked. We haven't, I don't know, man. You got to think. We got to be able to think for ourselves from time to time. Anyways, I had mentioned back to, it's like clapping seals sometimes, but I had mentioned that you give tough love. And this applies to me, by the way. I've said this over the years, and I try to be I try to be honest and a good faith. I'm a human being, so sometimes this isn't the easiest thing to receive, but I have had people come to me, and they've said, "Hey, Victor, I love you, man, but I think you're getting a little off track on this or on that." And I say, "Oh, you know what? You're right. That has happened, albeit few and far between. But it has happened where I've had people come to me in good faith, genuinely, and they say, "Hey, as a brother in Christ, I think that this particular thing is something that you're kind of overlooking." And I say, "You know what? That's a person who cares about me. Even if it's upsetting a little bit or a little bit annoying, that's somebody who at least cares enough to tell me, 'Hey, man, I love you, and as a brother, I'm going to come to you personally in private. I'm going to say, hey, I think that you're off course on this one.' We should do that." Now, we don't have the option to go to Trump in private. Otherwise, that would be the best course of action. We should be willing to do that and able to do that when it comes to the administration. And so some of the frustrations that I am having and some of the frustrations that others are having, but maybe have not yet figured out exactly how to articulate, is we have, of course, the situation on Iran, but it's not just that. I mean, we have a level of infighting that's just a little bit odd. It's concerning, not just a little bit odd. It's actually wrong. It's messed up. We have a level of infighting, and I don't know, maybe the Trump administration owed a lot of its success to Charlie Kirk, and people didn't appreciate that until he was gone. But the wheels are falling off the wagon in the post-Charlie world. It's been just over 6 months now since Charlie was killed. It's still, it's still. I'm kind of at a loss for words about the fact that Charlie has now been gone for 6 months. I mean, he held a lot together, I can tell you that much. But if you love somebody, you should be willing to address the issues. And the Trump administration has not just irritated people with Iran. Okay, it's also, let's look, for example, at the ICE raids. Remember, I mentioned last segment, we were talking about one of the laws of power is you got to crush your enemy completely. Trump has not done that. He's talked a lot. We've had some really cool edits on the Facebook account of the White House. Whoever's doing those, by the way, you're awesome. Like, they're really good edits. They're super good hype edits. It's just, we have a lot of talk. We have some provocative language. We have, the mass deportation is what Trump campaigned on, and then we go into places like Minneapolis, and we're busting people up, and then you have the Renee Good situation where she dies and the other guy dies, and then we leave. We left. What happened to that conversation? We left. We literally left. We left Minneapolis. There may be some limited enforcement going on, but the left, they got to win in that one. So that was not good. That was an embarrassment. It set the standard of how you can beat ICE. And it's not the fault of the ICE agents, obviously. But it's just, that seems like a pretty big mistake. Now, maybe you could say it was for political reasons. We have the midterms coming up. We're probably going to get killed in the midterms. That's just the way that it looks. I'm not speaking that into existence. Unless something changes, we got to get our game together pretty seriously, and it's got to come from the top, to be honest. I think the Trump administration is really doing us a number whenever it comes to the outcome of the midterms, but that's just kind of speculation. There's still some time. Things can change, and we also just historically, the president's party doesn't fare well in the midterms. That's just kind of a standard thing. But anyways, we had the ICE raids in Minneapolis where we left, unfortunately. We had 2 Americans that did end up dead. Now, out of their own stupidity, I don't blame Trump or the ICE officers, the DHS, Border Patrol. I don't blame them for those deaths. That was the fault of we won't rehash all of that either. But we did have 2 Americans died, which was bad. Who died? That was bad optics. The left was galvanized like crazy. Trump will do this stuff where he talks this huge game. And people get like really hyped up about it. And myself included, I hear him and I'm like, yeah, like that's what we voted for. This is the Trump that we wanted. He's going to go in and crush them. He's going to go in with an iron fist and he's going to finally do what has to be done. Like in the wake of the Charlie Kirk stuff, I thought, okay, now they're going to arrest these Antifa people. Now they're going to, and it's like kind of, we did nothing, like kind of nothing. The left is galvanized through it all. When Trump talks all of this talk, but never squashes them like a bug, they're galvanized, they're mobilized, they're riled up, they become more violent, they kill more just totally innocent people, like they start throwing grenades at people. We just saw this happen in New York. Some radical Muslim tried to chuck a nail bomb at somebody. I mean, it's insane. You whip them into a frenzy, and then you leave, you leave the entire situation. Now we just had the update from the administration. Apparently they're telling members of Congress, Republicans, that we should move away from talk about mass deportation. Now, they want to favor, highlighting talking points surrounding criminals, but hang on, that's not what we voted for. That's not, and it's not even what the majority of Americans support. I mean, if you look at the polling, still the majority, not the plurality, the actual majority, it's like 54% of Americans still support mass deportations. Trump just did a thing where he was talking about how, what was the exact? He was talking about we have to have a heart for people who are here illegally, that are working like convenience stores and hotels or something like that they're working jobs and they're good people. He wasn't talking about amnesty just yet, but holy cow, that's a really big change. If we look at what it was in the election cycle, the thing that got him elected, okay, these are like general election talking points. These are the things that got you elected. The American people supported it. They still support it on paper. They still support it in the polls. Mass deportation. We didn't run a campaign on, hey, deport these people or hey, deport those people. The sign said mass deportation. Okay, that's what I voted for. That's what we need. Now we're being told from President Trump himself that we have to have a heart for these people that are working on farms and working in hotels, and he used some weird word for it. But no, actually, no. I mean, we can have a heart like as decent Christian human beings. We don't want them to be fed to dogs or something like that, but we still enforce the law. We say, hey, man, I love you. In fact, I love you so much, I'm going to enforce the law. That's what if you have a child and your child does something they're not supposed to do, loving them isn't just saying, it's okay. I know that you just like broke a vase over my head, but it's okay. I love you, so I'm just not going to no, actually, you don't want to reward that kind of behavior. You don't do that when you love somebody. Again, when you love somebody, you enforce the law. Now he's saying that we need to have a heart for these guys, because otherwise, I guess we'll just be meanies. Maybe he's concerned about the trajectory for the midterms, and he's just kind of looking for some. I don't know, and I can't blame him because the polling is not looking good right now. The betting odds are not looking good. We're the Titanic heading directly toward an iceberg, and unless we change gears somewhere, yeah, we're probably going to be cooked. It looks like the SAVE Act is not going to pass, at the fault of many Republicans who aren't willing to bust through the filibuster. And part of that reservation, I would speculate, is that we don't want to bust through the filibuster and then lose the Senate. That's what they're concerned about. They're concerned that we're going to set a precedent. We're going to get rid of the filibuster. The left is going to come in, and then they're going to use it against us. They got to get over this. We've talked about it before. The left is going to do that anyway. Okay, so if they get to power, they're going to nuke the filibuster regardless. They've already told us that they're going to do that, so we can't continue with this philosophy of like, oh, we can't do anything because then the left might do it. Brother, they're already going to do it. They're not playing by the rules. They're already going to kill you. They're already going to chop your head off. They're going to celebrate if you get shot in the throat in front of your entire, friends, family, and the whole honest world to see. We're not dealing with good people here. Some, I'm assuming, are good people, but at the top, the Democrat Party, this is wicked. There's a cancer that has taken over. Anyways, that's all the time I have for you this week, everybody. Keep me in your prayers. Keep your country in your prayers. God bless.